Welcome to another Coffee with Mayor Coral. I have my cup of coffee, and I also have here with me Kerry Blume. Hi, Kerry. How are you?
Hi, Mayor. It's good to see you. And I have my tea.
You
So,
have your tea. There we go. Well, we are here today for a conversation about the Mayor's Community Policy Trust. This is something that I created when I came into office in 2018. And many people do not know, 2016. When I came into office in 2016. And many people do not know about the policy trust, the community policy trust. And so I wanted to have a conversation with you today to talk about what it is, why it was created, and the work that we've been doing.
it's great to be here this morning, Mayor. Thank you for creating this opportunity, a little chance to reflect and think about the purpose and the impact of these conversations. Um, can you share with us, why did you do this? What was the intent behind the Community Policy Trust?
Well, before we do that, let's introduce you to everybody. How about that? So
Okay.
you are Kerry Blume, and you've been facilitating the Community Policy Trust for me. Can you give us a little bit about your background?
Well, I've spent my entire career really in social services, health, and community services, really looking for change at the social and personal level has been really my motivation. I spent 15 years as the CEO of United Way of Northern Arizona. And, that's how we met back in 20 some years ago around the work at the Sunnyside Neighborhood Association. So, a lot of what I found during those years was that when we facilitate conversations, when we're able to really tap in to what people care about, we create innovation, we create trust, we create all the kind of conditions to actually bring about the changes we desire for our communities.
So I really appreciate the fact when I was first elected mayor, I had this idea to establish a community policy trust, and I reached out to you, and you were like, "Yes, I'd like to be involved with it." And so you have been involved since the beginning. And as a facilitator for the policy trust meetings that we have hosted, and you've done it on a volunteer basis, and I greatly appreciate that. So the idea of the trust, when I first became elected mayor in 2016, when I walked into the mayor's office, there was nothing in the office. There was a box that was sitting there, and it was one of those file boxes, but one of the really small ones. And there was, maybe it was halfway full of files. Some of the files had a couple sheets of paper. Some of the files had one sheet of paper that had some handwritten notes across the top of it. And that was all that was there. I felt very fortunate that I had been on council for 8 years. So what I did was I went into the council office and I moved all of my notes and my binders and everything that I had over to my new office. I was sitting there and I was thinking to myself, how hard is it to come into a position such as this and not have any historical knowledge, not have any background, not have what it is that you really need to be successful for the job. So I said right then and there that I wanted to leave whoever was coming after me information about the community and you know um, a in-depth knowledge or at least a look at some of the more meatier topics that we as a community have continued to struggle with for generations, right? I know that I've told people before, when you look at the Arizona Daily Sun and you look at the history section, the issue of affordable housing has been talked about since 1922, 1925 or something like that. Yet people want to know, well, how come we haven't fixed it? So I established something called the Mayor's Community Policy Trust. And the idea is that within this community locally, we have many people who have been elected officials. Everything from Congress people at the federal level to at the local level, city council members, school board members, sheriffs, people who have been elected to public office and who have served. Once they've served their time, they just kind of retire. But all that knowledge is just sitting there. And so I said, let's go find out from them, let's have them look at these different topics and find out, well, how come we didn't do this? Or is this idea actually new? And if it's not new, why wasn't it done 10, 20, 30 years ago? Did it lack the political will? Did it lack the funding to do it? Was it impractical? Is it practical now? What are some ideas that we could use to address this situation with the historical knowledge that you all have and the understanding? And what was great about it is you're looking at people from all over the spectrum, right? Because here at a local level, we serve in a nonpartisan fashion. So it's about going out and gathering all that knowledge and information and putting it together in a cohesive document for whoever's coming next, and also for the community to look at, right? For the community to look at and say, hey, this is what our elected officials from the past however many generations had to say about this.
Yeah. And you think about the brilliance of that ability to tap the wisdom, people who are so experienced and have had that, and then they can come into this dialogue. I remember early on, you were so grateful and that folks would come back, and people did because of the respect they had for you. That first time we gathered with the former mayors, the former officials from the city, and some key advisors, it was a really dynamic conversation.
It was. The very first thing we tackled was the minimum wage issue,
Yeah.
right? And we brought together a group of individuals. I'm looking at my documents now. So actually, we tackled the cost of living and minimum wage, right? It was the very first topic that we tackled. And I'm sitting here looking at the document. We had Paul Babbitt, former mayor, City of Flagstaff, was there. We had Steve Darton, who currently serves as a member of the Navajo Nation Human Rights Commission, but he was also a former city council member, right? They had Kara Kelty, who was there. She's currently on the school board, but she also used to be on council. We had Leroy Shinitwa, who was a former member of the Hopi. He was a former Hopi tribal chairman and a current member of the tribe. We had Carl Taylor, who used to be the Coconino County supervisor for District 1. And we had Mark Woodson. We did a phone interview. Mark Woodson was on Flagstaff City Council at one point. We also did a phone interview with Mayor Joe Donaldson, former council member Al White, and we had Mandy Metzger, who was part of the Coconino County Board of Supervisors in District 4, was also part of that discussion. And that discussion covered everything, every gamut, every part of the issue. And it talked about really political will and what needed to happen. It talked about a Solomon approach to the issue, contract requirements, competitive competition. It talked about everything and tried to provide a framework as to how we would move forward and what we needed to do. And I thought that was very interesting. Council actually, at the end of the day, I wouldn't say we went with one of the recommendations, but one of the recommendations that was in that document is actually what ultimately ended up happening in the community.
Yeah. It makes me wonder about how did these conversations, that one obviously early on, you can track directly to an influence at the council level. But can you think about some other situations where these conversations helped influence how you led?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one of the things that we had a conversation about was our youth opportunities and challenges, and what challenges we're having with the youth in our community. Some of the ideas that were in that particular document are ideas that when we talked about the budget and how we were going to address youth programming, those are some of the ideas that I brought forward and said, hey, these are some ideas that were vetted in the past by, different people. And there either wasn't the funding at that particular time, or there wasn't the political will at that particular time to move these things forward. I think the time is right now. I think the time is right to do this. Also with our housing conversation, the idea of the housing bond, right? That is not a new idea, even though we as the community think that that idea was new. That idea was proposed, a while ago, but we decided, what was it, 2 years ago, that we would try to go out for a housing bond to address some of our critical affordable housing needs. And that was an idea that was originally vetted 20 years ago. But at that particular time, again, it was very interesting in understanding the background of some of some of the issues that we have here in the city of Flagstaff. That, hey, this idea is not new. This idea came up 20 years ago, 30 years ago. The issue was either there wasn't the funding, there wasn't the political will, to move something forward. The timing wasn't right. And so it was kind of looking through some of these ideas and saying, hey, maybe the timing is right now. Kind of like the long-term plans that we have here in Flagstaff, where it took 20 years to do the bridge over 4th Street, right? It was always there. It was just the timing wasn't right to get to do it.
Right. I think about that the night we met with the housing trust, or the housing conversation for the community trust, and the kind of passion and the kind of the depth of knowledge of the people at that table about this housing issue. And at the time, Jimmy Jane, the county manager, was there. We had people from Flagstaff Shelter Services. We had people from Housing Solutions. If I recall, you've been down on a helicopter someplace helping people out on in Havasupai, I think. But it was quite a dramatic night, as I remember. You made it. You got there. It was such a sign of your commitment to this conversation, and then the level of genuine intention to change the policy related to affordable housing, and how all these different people could come together and have the conversation. It was, for me, so energizing to see. And I just wonder, how does that information now inform the next council? How can we carry that kind of energy forward?
Well, it's interesting too, because when you look at some of the things that the Housing Trust talked about, they talked about the fact that the community perception. They talked about the issue of whether or not housing was a right or a privilege, and where people live. They talked about the push and pull between open space and the need for housing. And the lack of housing that we have. And they also talked about the affordability of housing and what makes it, not affordable. And so they talked about homelessness and what does that look like in our community. The recommendations talked about, again, financing, and one of the ideas for the bond. One of the things that I think is really key for everybody to understand is that these documents live on. Mm-hmm. So, we went out and we got people who had been involved with this particular issue from all over. I wouldn't even say sides, from all around the issue. I think that's a better way of putting it. And we consolidated all of that information into a document. And, the document has key reflections and key recommendations. And the key recommendations are listed so people can pick and choose what they think, would be applicable to them. Not all of it has to do with the government either. I think that that's very important too. It also talks about what can people do outside of the government, how different organizations and people can move ideas forward, and bring about lasting change. And so these documents are here. And they are here for the next generation of council members to look at and reflect. And I think that is really key. And that's why I wanted to talk about it today, because I've been on council since 2008. And I am leaving at the beginning of December, right? My term is up. And depending on what happens in council, you're going to have council members who the most experience they have is 4 years. You'll have, depending on what happens in the election, right? You might have somebody on council who has 4 years of experience. Or you might have some councils, oldest, for lack of a better word, council members might have only 2 years, might only be 2 years into their 4-year term. It is impossible for everyone to know everything. Even though I have been on council for 12 years, I can remember when Scott Overton left council. He had been on council for 12 years, and he had been on council 2 years prior to me. And there were certain things that I would look at Scott and be like, were you here when this happened? Do you remember what happened? Why was it fixed that way? Or why was this policy done? Definitely, you can ask the city clerk, and the city clerk can pull the minutes, but you don't necessarily have the firsthand knowledge or the nuances as to why that decision was chosen over a different decision. And while you can sit there and armchair quarterback it, right? When you go back and you find out you had two decisions, why did you make that one? There is really good reason as to why that decision was chosen over the one that you look at now and say, well, let's try this one. So I think that that's really important, as we move forward, that you have the history and the connectivity to understand the different policies.
Yeah. When you talk about the fact that we brought people who were all around, not opposing sides, but people who had some level of interest in the topic. I wonder if you can share, like, how did you decide who to invite to this? What was your intent around that?
Well, the intent was the fact that you have so many elected officials in our community that have knowledge that were not being utilized. Think of the policy trust as a brain trust of our community, right? We are very lucky, in my mind, that we have so many ex council members, mayors, school board members. Like I said, we have congressperson, we have board of supervisors. You have all this knowledge, in-depth knowledge about policy, about the issues here in our community that was not being utilized. So it's like, let's bring all these individuals together and let's have a conversation as to what they know and why they know it and what they think about certain topics and what they were passionate about, right? When you go and you look at what it was they were passionate about, bring them in so we can have a conversation around that.
One of the ones that stands out to me as a real example of that diversity of input and conversation was the one on inclusivity, race, culture, and identity. We had a judge, the sheriff, many people around that table. What stands out to you from that particular conversation?
Yeah, that conversation, like you said, we had a judge, we had community activists around children. We had, for example, Dr. Brunick from the Museum of Northern Arizona. We had Sheriff Jim Driscoll was a part of that one. We had a reverend. And what stands out about that is they really focused. And I'm looking for the statement because I thought it was absolutely important, especially because of what Flagstaff is going through now, right? We're having these same conversations, and I really think it was beneficial for us to have had them. They concluded that inclusivity does not come about naturally. They said it needs to be fostered and encouraged. One member stated that this effort is the responsibility of community leaders, especially elected officials who've been placed in office to serve all the citizens in the community. They said that without solid policy and programs to the resolutions that we have as an inclusive community, our golden rule resolutions, they hold very little value. That these are things that we as elected officials need to carry forward, and understanding that it is up to us not to be divisive in our leadership style, right? And to really showcase what it is that we expect our community to be. And I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah. Particularly if you think this was 3 years ago and you think about how the issue of race has become so much more prominent in people's consciousness and intentions to create change, at least publicly. I know many of us have been holding this for many, lifetimes, but I'm curious, where do you think the possibility lies in that intention? I mean, that intentionality that it isn't going to come it isn't going to come easily. So, as a leader and for this community and future council, what would you say?
Well, I think one, it's important for council to understand that, right?
Yeah.
You know, that change does not come easily, and acceptance, some of us have an issue with that. And so just making sure that we as a council are acting with purpose and acting mindfully, understanding that when we say certain things, you know, that can divide or that can bring together, and how we move forward with the policies, and making sure that we are mindful of the entire community, because that was something that came out through every policy trust. Every group of leaders talked about the need to make sure that we remember that we represent an entire community, and how we go about doing that with purpose, and how we go about making sure that it's done in a way that includes everyone.
Mhm.
You know, that was something that came about in the affordable housing policy trust, where it talked about the fact that, you know, the lack of housing and people not being able to become housing secure. It's not that everybody has to buy a house, and not everybody's house is going to be that $500,000 house, but to have a place where you feel secure in allows for you to be more involved in your community and be more a part of your community. And that is something that we need to be mindful of.
Yeah. I think about the willingness that people had in these conversations to talk about their own experience. I think at each time we had a level of trust, to be an openness, and two things came up for me as you were describing. One, when you talk about that issue of the housing and the housing affordability, at the housing conversation, we had a woman, a younger woman who worked for one of the nonprofits providing housing services. And she talked about, for herself, a fully employed young professional. It was difficult for her to be able to afford housing and food and take care of her kids. That this notion that housing touches across our community, it is such a significant barrier or opportunity, as you're describing, to be part of this community. Um, the other thing that stands out to me was in the conversation we had on inclusivity, that when people talked, you can't make assumptions. Like, we had a white man who had an African American daughter. He knew from her lens and her vantage point what it was like, in a way that he personally had never experienced. So I think that the fact that people were willing to share their personal experiences helped kind of open the hearts of the other people in these circles.
Mhm.
You know? So,
Yeah, I mean, everyone talked. It was very interesting too, right? Because even though individuals were elected officials or leaders within that particular topic, they talked about their connection to that topic. So you might have an elected official and you're talking about, like you said, inclusivity. Um, and they're talking about their direct personal relationship to that particular topic. Like that individual who you would have never known was like, wait a minute, I know a lot about this because, you know, my daughter is Black. You had another individual who was like, I know a lot about this because I've been homeless before.
right.
You know, and I think that that's very important, that as elected officials, people were bringing their own personal experiences, they were looking at the issue through their own lens. I think that's extremely valuable to
Right.
understand how policy was made.
Yeah. Yeah. And that we don't leave our own individual frame of reference at the door when we go in to make these kind of decisions, you know.
Mhm.
So, um, I'm curious if there's other kind of images or stories or highlights that stand out to you from this series of conversations.
Well, I do want to mention that while I want to mention, I guess, the overall team too. So while you were the facilitator, I had the fortunate opportunity to have interns from NAU who worked on this project and who actually helped scribe, for lack of a better word, right? Take notes and make sure that things were written down. And so I want to make sure that we point that out. You know, for example, Sam Cullen, who was a NAU political science graduate. He's now in law school.
That's great.
There's also, he was an NAU student. He was senator for the Associated Students of NAU. I know I have Syria working right now. And I can't remember her last name, but she did the last community policy trust with us, because there is one more community policy trust coming up. And it seems like I have one more intern who I just want to make sure that we mention them, because our interns were like a huge part of this.
Yeah. You know, it was one of those times when the talent of the students at NAU made such a contribution, because they were very thorough in how they captured and wrote up these documents. So,
and they also were part of the conversation, which I thought was great, because that allowed for them to be, as young people, right, for them to be part of the conversation and interact with some of the individuals that have been doing this for a while, and ask them questions. So I thought that was interesting too. Yeah. I think I got everybody. Okay. Right.
Well, when I think about highlights, though I do think about the young people. When we did a discussion on safety in the schools, and we had high school students there, or the conversation about youth. For me, creating a forum where we could really hear youth voices, it was so insightful. I mean, it gave me insight that I was far removed from. And what I remember in that one is we asked everybody at the table to reflect back on their own school experiences. So they were able to contrast what they had experienced in life with what the students today were experiencing.
And I think it's cool. I just want to do this as well, because we have Mark from the Boys and Girls Club. Well, at that particular one, we had Amanda, who was the CEO of the Boys and Girls Club in Flagstaff. She participated in that particular policy trust. We have Mark, who made a comment about thank you for supporting and advocating for our Flagstaff youth. You know, we had also juvenile. We had someone who was also a judge for, family court, who was there participating as well in that conversation. What really came up in that conversation also, it centered around the 40 developmental assets for youth. And that whole conversation about making sure that the youth that are growing up in our community have these assets, or have access to these assets. You know, that was an initiative that was started by Coconino Coalition of Children and Youth. And it was moved forward. And then, you know, we kind of went on to doing other things, but it went back to that and saying, how do we make sure that youth have the access to those assets? And again, I think it's really important for people to also know is that there was recommendations that these policy briefs that the individuals that were part of this gave. There was recommendations as to how they thought the particular issue could be addressed or moved forward, things like that. And so I think that that's important. And those are available on the city's website. So if you go to the city's website and you go to Mayor Coral Evans, if you look off to the right and you scroll down, there are links to each of the policy briefs except the last one, because the last policy brief is currently being edited. And I'll make sure that I put the link in this conversation as well, so people can go and click on these and say, okay, this is what the policy brief looks like. I think the longest policy brief, because we tried to make it also, we took all the information and we condensed it. So you wouldn't have to read through 50 pages, right? I think that the longest brief is 15 pages, maybe. But it also lists who was part of it, what the conversation was about, what the questions that the policy trust was asked, and what were their reflections on the questions, and what were their key recommendations. So the last community policy trust we just got done with in August.
I think, yeah, it was August. It was not
Uh,
long, early
yeah, we
September. Yeah.
it was very interesting because half of it was done via this mode, Zoom, right? But the other half of it was done in person. And so, in looking back at the conversation, yes, the policy briefs. Thank you, Kimberly. The policy briefs are available to the public. They are on the website. We distributed 50 copies of every brief around the community at the time the brief was done, but they do live online. And the last one is not online, though. We are hoping that it will be online within the month. And so we sat down, we had the unique opportunity to realize that 6 of the mayors for the city of Flagstaff are still with us, right? There's 6 living mayors, 5 of which currently live here in Flagstaff, and 1 does not. We had the opportunity to sit down and have an in-depth conversation with the 5 that are here. That includes myself. But we had a Mayor Paul Babbitt. We had Mayor Bavasi. We had Mayor Donaldson. And we had Mayor Jerry Neighbors and myself. And the 5 of us sat down and had a conversation that centered on the difference between activism and statesmanship.
Mhm.
And what does that look like? And how does that play out when it comes to the role of mayor? Then we had the opportunity to sit down with 6 vice mayors. So we did the mayors in person. Very thankful that the Arboretum allowed us to, they hosted us there so we could sit out amongst the trees in the middle of COVID. I would like to say we were at least 10 feet apart from one another having this conversation. And then we had the opportunity to do vice mayors. And so we had Rick Lopez, who was a vice mayor here. We had Al White, who was a vice mayor. We had Kara Kelty.
We had Jamie Whelan.
Jamie Whelan.
Yeah.
We had Adam Shimoni. Oh, there we go. We had Adam Shimoni, and we had Scott Overton. That's who we had, Scott Overton, and then myself, because I was also a vice mayor. That's how we ended up with 6 of us. And we had the same conversation about the difference between activism and statesmanship, and what does it mean to lead in a diverse community, and how do you make sure that all voices are heard and all voices are part of the conversation.
You know, this one, I mean, they were all meaningful conversations. And this one, I think in part because it's in the middle of this election season, that we see so much division. The fact that we could gather people who had very different political viewpoints, and yet there was a commitment to the well-being of Flagstaff. There was a genuine care for our community, and that came through. And I can tell you, you know, I drive by one of the former mayor's homes and I see his political signs. They're very different than the political signs that I have. And yet, when we sat down and had this conversation, the ability to see through how all these issues actually matter, you know, the discussions about housing, water, wages, all of this is part of this infrastructure that we all depend on. And the commitment to dialogue and democracy didn't waver for any one of you. I thought it was quite bold, really, Mayor, that you thought of doing this and that you brought people into this place for this conversation. And every one of them was deeply appreciative, because I don't think it happens anyplace else. You know, they left saying, wouldn't it be great if we got together for a cup of coffee every now and then? So maybe you've actually started something that could benefit. But this bigger topic of statesmanship versus activism, I first of all, I had to overcome the idea of manship. Why not state womanship? Can you share about that a little bit?
So there's also a connection to this particular topic and this last policy trust. So first and foremost, I think it's important for us to really understand that, in bringing all the mayors together like that, you had people who were elected in, I think it was 1974, 72, something like that, all the way to present.
Yeah.
So you had that that knowledge, right? That area of knowledge, that body of knowledge, and all of these individuals were elected at different times, but they all were dealing with the same issues that we have now. So I was appreciative of the fact that I could hear part of the conversation, right, and be like, okay, this is what's happening now. As mayor, I can tell you this is what's going on now. But then it was very interesting to be like, okay, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and this way, this is what was happening, and these were the issues we dealt with, and this is what it means to be a statesman. So my PhD that I'm working on, my thesis has to do with activism and statesmanship, right? And what does that look like moving forward to make sure that we are actually representing individuals the way we're supposed to be doing. And so I was very, very excited to be able to gather all the people that I gathered to have this conversation. The reason why I just chose statesman rather than trying to change it to statesperson, stateswoman, statesman, is because I think it's just a term, period. To me, and I could be wrong, and I'm sure that there's other people that would disagree, but it's like mayor is not specific to a gender, right? Captain is not specific to a gender. And so I'm like, statesman, I don't think it's particular to a gender, but that's just me. It's very simple in my mind. It's like you either have statesman qualities or you don't. And so I think moving forward, there's definitely people that are like, well, I think you should make it gender specific or whatnot. But it was just simpler for me to just do it that way.
Yeah. And what are those qualities?
One of the things that the mayors brought out was the need to have the vision, right? And understand what the vision is, and to make sure that you are representing what the vision is. And you're not getting pulled from one side to another, but you're understanding that. They also talked about the ability to see the entire picture and how the picture fits together. They also talked about relationships and the importance of relationships, and in understanding that it might be that you disagree on this particular issue, but you're going to need to talk tomorrow because there's a different issue that you need to have a conversation about, and about burning bridges completely and then having to go back and rebuild them, or being able to share the same space and just understand that you have different viewpoints of looking at things, right? And they talked about representing the whole, and that when you become a mayor, you have to represent the whole. You are the mayor of everybody. And I think that that's important for us to understand. The vice mayors, it was very interesting too. They had the same reflection and talked about, activism and statesmanship, and how there is some overlap, but then there are differences between the two, right? And when you're acting as an activist, you're usually focused on one particular issue or one particular group of individuals, and you need activists because activists are making sure that they're pointing out what is wrong, right? Like, this is wrong, this is unacceptable, this needs to be addressed, and then you have the statesman that is trying to then, now that you understand what the issue is, working together to create the policy that addresses it. But you're creating policy that does not exclude everybody else for the sake of one. It was a very interesting conversation with both groups.
Yeah. It really wasn't. I think that some of the people had actually run against each other, and, kind of had knockdown, drag out campaigns, but were able then to sit down and have this conversation. And for me, what I left with was that understanding of the relationship between the activists and kind of the policymakers, problem solvers, right? That that the mayor demands that you become a problem solver, policymaker, that particular role. And I think several people reflected on that they actually had to move. I mean, I think you yourself talked about how
Mhm.
you had to change how you approached this role of governance once you became mayor. Okay, can you give us a little insight on your own journey with that?
We know definitely. I mean, most people know that I came in as a hardcore activist, right? When I was first elected in 2008, myself and the vice mayor had a conversation about this last Friday. I came in, I was part of the group that helped save the Murdoch Community Center. We protested, we marched on council, we did sit-ins, we did write-ins, we did all of it. Um, and so when I came in, it was really very much so around, saving Murdoch and making sure that the issue was that we didn't feel like we were being heard. Um, and so it pains me now when people are like, we don't feel like we're being heard. I'm like, well, what else can we do? What more can we do? Because that is a huge issue, right? To make sure that everybody feels heard and make sure that people understand that we're listening, and that we hear them. And it's continuous, right? Because people feel heard in different ways. What works for one individual might not work for somebody else, might not work for somebody else. So it's something that I think every council strives to be better than the council before. And I hope that they continue to strive to be better, right? And to make sure that people feel that their voice is being heard. Well, when I got on council, we saved the Murdoch Community Center, and that's been for 12 years. And it's a vibrant community center in the heart of our city that provides services and activities. Well, now, once you get on council and once you get that issue addressed, you still have everything else that you are in charge of, right? So I talked about the fact that there's water issues, okay? There's trash pickup. There's street sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. There is our environmental concerns. There is arts and science and culture. There is everything else that comes along with being an elected official and being on council. So it's not just that you can focus on one issue because you are the council member for the entire city. And there's 75,000 people that live in this city. So you have to grow and you have to evolve. See, like now I can talk water policy with anyone. Now I know a whole lot about our environment and about the climate action adaptation plan and why it's important and why we're doing these certain things. I know about our zoning code and why our zoning code is important. I can talk about the budget all day, every day, because I have an understanding of the budget and the pension issue that we had and things like that. So it's how you evolve as a council person to know that you might have come in with one pet peeve or looking at one thing, but there is more to serving on council than that one narrow focus you might have come in with. There's 75,000 people here in the city of Flagstaff. There is 150,000 people in and out every day. There is 6 million visitors a year that we have here. And you are the council person or the mayor for all of that, right? And so it's really understanding what that looks like and the fact that um, that there's diverse groups of people and there's diverse opinions and there's value in all of those opinions and all of those thoughts, and that's why you come together as a group and you're deciding, okay, what is the best way to address this situation.
And the other thing that you mentioned was that idea of relationships, because and I'm not going to remember which mayor it was, but one of them spoke about how critical it was, the quality of the relationships that he had with the other people on the dais, that he had to have that maintained in a way that could do exactly what you were just describing, address this whole plethora of issues and approaches. And the other quality of a community like Flagstaff was the ability to be in relationship with other, like, so for example, with our senators, with our Congress people, that maintaining sort of the dignity of the office. I think, I don't remember if that was exactly the word, but the notion was that we would be respectful and be respected. Um, and so that relationship quality was an essential part of statesmanship.
And there was also, now that you reminded me of that conversation, there was also the conversation about courage and bravery.
Yes, right.
There was a whole dialogue about courage and bravery and about saying what needed to be said in a
Mhm.
way that was respectful and dignified, but saying what needed to be said and having the courage to do what needed to be done, even if it was unpopular, right? One mayor was like, hey, I made the decision and I supported it and I talked about it, talked about the new city hall.
Yeah.
About the fact that, remember the city
Yeah.
hall was originally where the old courthouse is, and it was a old furniture store, dilapidated, falling apart, all the rest of that. And we need to build a new city hall. That's what needs to happen. We just need a new city hall, and talk about the fact that that was most likely why he didn't get reelected. People were upset over the expenditures, but it was something that needed to be done.
Yeah.
There was another mayor that talked about an unpopular decision. I talked about the fact that, me and talking about the need for affordable housing and a particular piece of property out 180 was not a popular conversation and people didn't want to hear it. I talked about that, but it's things that need to be said. So there was a conversation about, part of being a statesman is being brave enough to say the things that really need to be said, because sometimes we as a community might not want to hear it, but it needs to be said.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
We've gotten a few comments here. Patrice Horseman said, great discussion on leadership. And I think that's what we're describing here, is what does it mean to be a leader with this governance responsibility?
And Kimberly Robinson mentioned, how often does a community policy trust meet? So we met around specific topics. We've had 5 of these, right? And so how would one contact the group? So this is part of the conversation today, is that, it's my hope that the next mayor that comes in, continues the policy trust and continues the policy trust around key issues that are in our community. And I think it's something that should live on with the office of the mayor here in the city of Flagstaff. That is my hope. That's one of the reasons why we're having the conversation now, is that, I am leaving office. This is something that I did start. The policy briefs are there for everybody to view. This last policy brief, again, we're hoping that it should be done within the month. It will be posted for everyone to see. It's going to be also a chapter in my PhD dissertation. It's a chapter for that. But we are hoping that whoever comes next, I have talked to one of the individuals, someone who's currently on council, and they see value in these conversations and bringing elected officials together. And so that individual has indicated that they would continue it. I have not had the opportunity to talk to the other candidate. But we are hoping that people understand there is value with this history. I will tell you that, I've been on council since 2012, and to have the opportunity to sit with to sit with 4 other mayors, right? Again, one mayor who was here in the 70s, and then all the way current, and have the conversation about housing, have the conversation about open space, have the conversation about leadership, statesmanship, all of those topics as they move forward, I think is absolutely invaluable. The mayors did say, and I was sitting here going, wow, we did record the session because we recorded it so we could write everything down, right? But one of the things that, I left there thinking, and the mayors left there with the suggestion of, how cool would it have been, one of to have just televised it, but then how cool would it be to bring them together maybe once a year as just a reflection on, hey, these are some thoughts over some of the key issues that we're having here in the city. because it was absolutely a fascinating conversation.
I'm struck by the concept of elder. You know, you think about elder statesmen, right? And that opportunity, I think there wasn't a single person in that conversation who was still seeking office or interested in being in office. They did not have a political agenda by coming and engaging in this. And the beauty of tapping elders to help us make a better life now and welcoming young leaders. I mean, absolutely, it's time for some of us to step back and bring in young leaders, but it's a partnership. It's a joint thing. It's not, oh, just ditch all the elder statesmen and we're going to do it without any of that. And that ability to create the forum for that dialogue in a respectful way, I think is an attribute and something that the city of Flagstaff can offer as an example to other communities. So.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's important too, because like you said, you know, the mayors that when we all were there, mm-hmm. there were mayors that ran against the previous mayor, right?
Right.
And so, I mean, there literally was, I was very appreciative that Mayor Neighbors was a part of the policy trust, right? And having him part of the policy trust and having the dialogue allowed me to understand why some of the policies or why he thought a certain way. It's like, oh, you know, and then there was also, you know, other mayors that had run against the previous mayor, but we were all sitting there as mayors talking about, hey, this is what we learned. This is how we grew. This is what we changed. You know, and looking back on it, this is something that could have happened. And so I thought that it was a very good experience. And it was, again, not one side or the other, but looking at it, I guess, in a 360 lens.
The whole, yeah. So we ended each conversation, or we didn't end, we integrated into each conversation an opportunity for the participants to offer up one wish that they had, and around that particular topic, you know. And I wonder if you know, we've got a few minutes left, want to offer up a wish that you have for this going forward.
You know, I would say that my wish really is that we have some seriously complex issues that we are dealing with as a community. And I do not think that they are insurmountable at all. And the conversation really is, how do we address our issues in a way that is inclusive? In a way that is not one side or the other. Because again, when you have these conversations and you look at the policy briefs, it's not about one side or the other. It's about the totality of the facts and how we move forward under the constraints that we have. Because we talked about the constraints too, right? There is fiscal constraints. There are personnel constraints. There's time constraints. And there's environmental constraints. So how do we move forward in a way that brings everybody forward and allows everybody to be part of the conversation and allows everybody to prosper and to grow? And what does that look like? It's also understanding that there may not be current political will for whatever issues, whatever reason. And it might be a really awesome, great idea, because that was something that we learned throughout all of the policy trust. You know, the mayor's policy trust. It's like, yeah, we were going to try that in 1980, but the political will wasn't there, right? Or we had the political will in like 1995, but we didn't have the funding to do it, right? And so it's understanding how policies move forward and why they move forward in different ways and at different times. And then there was a policy that had the political will, but the community didn't have any buy-in for it. It's like, so you had 7 people that were ready to go, and the community was like, we don't want to do that at all, right? So understanding how they all come together and understanding the relationships, because at the end of the day, we're all going to be here in Flagstaff. We're going to see one another in the grocery store at some point, or at one of the fiestas or festivals downtown. So how do we make decisions? How do we address issues? How do we approach the complex problems that we have that we need to approach and get through and address, but also maintain the sense of community that we're going to need to maintain because we all live here.
Right. Yeah. Well, so I just want to take this moment, Mayor, just to say thank you for your leadership. And it's been, I think I was counting 22 years since I met you. And you were a young activist fighting for the neighborhoods. And the beauty of how you took and have taken that knowledge, that experience, that understanding of the real conditions on the ground, and brought that knowledge and understanding forward, and maintain the integrity of those relationships moving forward to this role as mayor. So I'm sorry to see you be leaving as mayor shortly, but I'm very grateful for what you've given our city during this time. And I think that legacy will live on. So
I'm very grateful for the opportunity to have served my community in this capacity. I tell everyone that, being mayor of a community that you grew up in has got to be the ultimate privilege. And I feel so blessed to have had such an opportunity. I absolutely love my community. It's a beautiful community. And I'm looking forward to, what happens as we move forward and deal with the issues that we have. I'm looking forward to seeing what our new council does, how they address things, how they work together. It's going to be just awesome to see.
Yeah. Yeah. And 2021 is a new day, and we hope for the health and well-being of everyone.
Yeah.
And can I use a moment of your time on this to remind people the importance of wearing your mask, the importance of getting your flu shot, and the importance of looking out for each other. And our mental health right now really matters. And so take time to reach out and connect with each other, and don't hesitate to call and get help. And there's a resource called Stronger as One.
Yeah.
And so if you need help, don't hesitate to reach out.
Now more than ever, it's really important for us to be community minded, right? Now it is more important than ever for us to stop and think before we respond to something. We do not know what level of stress or what point people are at in their lives. We have this pandemic that some of us thought was going to be gone in March. Others thought we would be done with in June. Everyone thought we would be back to normal by now. And now we're understanding that this prolonged not normal seems like it's going to be our normal. You have some people who are introverts and they don't mind the way things are. You have other people who are not introverts at all. You have kiddos that really would function better in certain environments for learning that are not necessarily functioning in the situations that they're in. Some people have the ability to work from home, some do not. Some that are having to go out to work are afraid for their health. So it's just a difference. It's very uncertain and it's very unsettling to be in a prolonged stage of not knowing for as long as we have been. So I would just remind people that, if someone says something, sometimes our first reaction is to respond back, right? It might be that we need to really stop and just take a step back and just consider that we do not know. We have no clue what anybody's going through. And so we just need to be mindful of that. So thank you, Kerry, for your time today. Thank you for all of us for joining us. Again, our conversation had to do with the Mayor's Community Policy Trust. You can find those documents online. There is one that's currently being edited. I will go back and paste the link directly to those documents in this conversation so people can find them. But again, we were really talking about why I created the Mayor's Community Policy Trust, and the information that's there is really invaluable because it spans the elected officials who have been in our community for forever, talking about some of the things, some of the same challenges that we still have, and how just viewing it through their lenses. Tomorrow, we also have a special coffee with Coral. I will be talking with a community builder, Maria Castillo, and we will be talking about the different initiatives and things that we did in the Sunnyside neighborhood area with regards to community policing, youth activities, and education. And again, it's at 7:30 in the morning, so I invite people to bring their coffee, or in Carrie's case, tea, and just be a part of that conversation. Completely appreciate the questions that people are asking, and we encourage you to continue to ask them. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Bye-bye.
Nicely done. Beautiful.
Okay, good.
Yes. It was so good to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you for making this all easy.
It's an easy platform. So thank you for being open, and I just really appreciate you. So thank you so much.
Yeah. Take care.
All right. Take care. I know we'll.
Okay.
Yes. All right. Take care. Peace.